growing up, Christmas was always such a special time for our family. And my parents well, they wanted to create moments and memories and traditions that would just, well, not just last through the years that we're living in the house, but that they could span generations. And for my parents, well, they didn't have that growing up. They didn't have the best upbringing, and they didn't have, well, a lot of special traditions and moments and memories to look back on. But something happened when they got married, and, well, when Jesus intersected with their life, everything changed. And I think about childhood, especially Christmas time, and, well, there's so many special moments that I think about, except for one. You see, Christmas morning, my parents had these draconian rules that were strictly enforced. And here's the thing I knew about my parents. I mean, a rule was a rule. One of those rules was, well, we couldn't leave our bedrooms before 7 a.m. But I was one always wanting to break the rules. And so I would army crawl out of my bedroom to my sister's bedroom, which was right next door. And oh, by the way, my parents' bedroom was right across the hallway from my bedroom. So I would army crawl into my sister's bedroom, which kind of led to rule number 2, that we couldn't wake our parents before 7 a.m. And not only could we not wake our parents before 7 a.m., well, we couldn't be loud until 7 a.m. We couldn't accidentally, laugh louder or talk louder to try to wake them up. And so as I army crawled into my sister's room, and I would gently wake her up, and we would sit there in her bed, and we would stare at the clock as it slowly ticked to 7 a.m. And when I mean slowly, it couldn't move any slower. But we talk. We talk about all the things we thought maybe, just maybe, would be underneath the Christmas tree. And what I didn't realize is, well, my mom and dad were already awake in their bedroom next door, and they were laying in their bed listening to my sister and I whisper back and forth. And what I didn't realize is my parents, already awake in their bedroom, they would sit there with smiles on their faces. My sister and I would just giggle as we were talking about with so much excitement of what just maybe we were going to get that year. And what I didn't realize until I became a dad is my parents, as they lay there in their bed, they were anticipating of what Christmas morning was going to be like. And right at 7 a.m., my sister and I would go running out of her bedroom. We'd run into my parents' bedroom. We'd jump on their bed. We thought we were waking them up, but they were already awake. We'd make our way down the long hallway around the corner, and well, quickly our eyes would start to assess all the presents that were underneath the tree. But what we knew was there was one more rule. So we would sit down in a circle, and my dad would grab the Christmas storybook from underneath the tree, the book that at one point was brand new, but what I remember is this tattered, ripped book that had, well, been read over many years. And we'd go around the circle reading the Christmas story. You see, for my mom and dad, they wanted to make sure that Jesus was always at the center of everything we did. And that, well, especially on Christmas morning. You see, we're in this season called Advent, and that word Advent simply means coming. And so many times when people think of the word Advent, they think about the Christmas story, Jesus being born. And that's a very important part of Advent. But, well, there's actually more to Advent than just the story of Jesus being born. And as we make our way through this series, Hope Rising, we're going to be looking at the different aspects of Advent. And there's going to be 5 very specific insights, components, that when we think about Advent, we should realize what Advent is truly all about. The Apostle Paul was writing this letter to the church, a gathering of people located in the great city of Rome. And as Paul is making his way through this letter, we get to what we call chapter 15, this section of the letter. And well, Paul's going to give us, well, the first thought, the first component, the first insight that we're going to attach to this series, to Advent. But what Paul does before he gets to that insight, Paul starts to set up the framework. And the framework was, well, all about relationships. So in Romans chapter 15, verse 1, he talks about that when you are strong, you are to help people that aren't as strong. And he then goes on and talks about your neighbors and how you should be there for your neighbors. And then Paul talks about how God encourages and gives you strength. And because God encourages and gives us strength, we should encourage and give people strength. And then Paul talks about how, well, it's important for us to be one. So he's setting up this framework on how we should interact with each other. And then Paul writes these words. He writes, accept one another. And when I read those words, something interesting happened within my brain. I mean, I read the words, accept one another, but all of a sudden this other word kind of slid in, and the word was agree. And I think partly because this has been a year filled with disagreements. But Paul didn't write agree, he wrote accept. And here's what Paul understood, and it's something that we all have to pay attention to. You can accept the person without agreeing with the person. In fact, that's what love looks like. You don't have to agree with that person's point of view. You don't have to agree with that person's perspective. You don't have to agree with that person's politics. You don't have to agree with that person's, where they shop or where they like to eat or what they like to do. You don't have to agree with the person, but well, Paul's saying, hey, you still have to accept them because that is what love looks like. And then Paul takes it one step further to say, hey, you need to accept one another. And then he gives us the motivation. He writes, just as Christ accepted you, accepted me. And when you just sit there and think about that thought, I mean, Jesus doesn't agree with every one of my thoughts. Jesus doesn't agree with every one of my actions. Jesus does not agree with every one of my perspectives or points of view, but Jesus still accepts me. Paul's like, hey, accept one another, whether you agree with them or not, because Jesus has accepted you. And when we do that, the outcome of that, this is what Paul writes. He goes, the outcome of accepting one another is it brings praise to God. It's an act of worship. When we accept people, especially people we don't agree with, when we accept people, understanding that Jesus has accepted us, that's worship. We're worshiping God. And then Paul starts to turn this corner. He's going to write some thoughts that might feel a little confusing, but no, he's setting up such an important framework, especially into, this season, Advent. And Paul writes, for I tell you that Christ has become a servant. Think about that image. Think about that picture, especially Christmas time. That Jesus, the Son of God, came to this earth, and he wasn't born into a palace with people serving him and cooking him meals. No. Jesus, the Son of God, was born in a cold, dark, damp cave. I mean, that is the image of a servant. And he was a servant of the Jews on behalf of God's truth. And that thought might feel so restrictive, but remember, Paul's leading us somewhere. Because he goes on, so that the promises that God made to the patriarchs. Who are the patriarchs? Well, Abraham to his son Isaac, Isaac to Jacob, Jacob to his 12 sons that become the 12 tribes of Israel, that become the Jewish people, the nation in which God's Son would come from. And Paul says, hey, Jesus, a servant of the Jews, was all part of God's, his plan, his promises. I mean, the promise that he spoke to Abraham when he looked at Abraham, that this was confirmed through him, through Abraham. When God said, hey, Abraham, your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed. And that was a promise from God. That not just the Jewish people, but all people would be blessed through Abraham. And it was Jesus himself that said, very truly, I tell you, before Abraham. I mean, Jesus recognized the fact that Abraham was a real person. He lived on this earth. And Jesus said, hey, before Abraham, I am. Jesus, with his own mouth, claiming to be God the Son. And then Paul writes, he goes, and moreover, that the Gentiles is anyone who's not a Jew. He goes, moreover, that the Gentiles might glorify God for his mercy. And then Paul, wanting to make sure that everyone reading his letter, everyone listening to him would understand that these promises that God has made have come true, that God had promised over and over and over again. Because we think about the promise God made to Abraham. Abraham was a tribal leader, a group of people that he led. And think about this. How many tribes over the course of thousands of years do we know nothing about? How many tribal leaders like Abraham lived on this earth? They had a lot of people, and then another tribe came in, killed them off. Or they had infighting, they separated off. Countless tribes have lived on this earth that we know nothing about. But Abraham, well, we know about his tribe. And we know about his son Isaac. And we know about his grandson Jacob. And we know about the 12 tribes. And we know about Israel. In fact, Israel is here to this day, that God's promises always come true. And so Paul rapid fires. He starts grabbing insights, thoughts, verses from, his Bible. We now call it the Old Testament. He starts grabbing these verses, and the first thing he writes, he grabs a thought from 2 Samuel, another one from the Psalms. He goes, therefore, I will praise you among the Gentiles. I will sing praises to your name. And then he grabs another one from Deuteronomy, and he writes, rejoice, you Gentiles, with his people. And then he grabs another one from the Psalms, Psalms 117. He says, praise the Lord, all of you Gentiles, let all the people extol him. And then he writes, it's one of these famous lines from the prophet Isaiah, especially around Christmas time. He goes, the root of Jesse, King David's dad, King David, the mighty King David, that God promised King David that there would be a king that would come from his lineage, but not like any other king. He was going to be a forever king. And Paul goes, the root of Jesse will spring up, one who will arise to rule over the nations. You see, thousands of years before Jesus came to this earth as a baby, God was scripting a story, not just for one group of people, but for all people, for everyone. And Paul says, and in him, Jesus, the Gentiles will hope. See, Paul was saying the promises of God, his promises, thousands of years in the making, have come true through Jesus. And God's promise was for everyone. That includes you. It was for everyone. And that God's promises would last forever. You see, part of Advent is realizing that God's promises will always come true. That God is who he says he is, and he will always do what he says he's going to do. And the birth of Jesus is a promise that God made, a promise he made to Abraham that there would be a blessing for all people, all nations, forever. And then Paul, as he's taking people on this journey, writes these words. And these words are going to will guide this entire series, Hope Rising. Paul writes, may the God of hope, God who's a source of hope, God that fuels us with hope, but it's not our definition of hope. You see, we use this definition of hope and we slap a question mark next to it. We say things like, well, I hope I get the job. I hope I get the raise. I hope I get that for Christmas. I hope my car makes it to the gas station, right? We slap a question mark next to hope, and well, it's our own version of optimism, right? We can be extremely optimistic, but we still attach a question mark because we're just not really sure. Right now, we're all hoping that the year 2021 is different than 2020. But how big is that question mark? But that's a vastly different hope than what Paul's talking about. In fact, Paul says, may the God of hope, the hope has an exclamation point. That hope is a confident expectation. No question mark. No kind of half-hearted optimism. No. God says, no. Be tethered to the source of hope, confident expectation to God. And that hope, that God is the only source of. Paul writes, may that hope fill you with all joy and peace. Think about that. I mean, this isn't joy and peace that comes from external factors or external sources. No. This joy is internal. This peace is internal. And it comes from being sourced by the God of hope. You see, when you're leaning into, when you're holding on to the God of hope, confident expectation, exclamation point, right? You're filled. Filled with joy. Filled with peace. As you trust in him. As you have faith in a God whose every promise is going to come true. Every promise he's going to fulfill. As you trust in a God that is who he says he is and will always do what he says he's going to do. So that you may overflow. This isn't just a little bit. This isn't just right up to the rim. No. It is overflowing out of you. Why? Confident expectation in a God who is who he says he is and will do all things that he says he's going to do. But remember, it's not by your power. It's not about your will. It's not about your strength. No, it's by the power of the Holy Spirit. It's by the power of God, the Spirit. You see, Advent is about hope rising in the midst of a hopeless world. We have confident hope. Confident hope. Why? Because of God's promises. His storyline that he's been scripting for thousands of years. Why? Because God is a loving and merciful God. And his desire is for all people, everyone, you, to have a relationship with him. So throughout this series, we're going to Well, we're going to hold on to that one insight, that one verse from Paul. And my encouragement for you is that you memorize it. That you memorize it. So this week, every day, say these words out loud. As you drive to work, as you're getting into the shower, as you're dropping kids off, whatever you do, in the rhythm of your day, say these words, again, out loud. There's something about saying things out loud. And I want to invite you, memorize these words, and then say them every day. Memorize and say them every day. Let this be your prayer this Advent season. May the God of hope, that he's the source of, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, as you place your faith in him. And remember, Jesus, he doesn't talk about the amount of your faith, the quantity of your faith. No. Jesus says, hey, your faith can be really itty bitty. It's all about who the source of your faith is in, where you place your faith, so that you may overflow with hope, confident hope, hope with an exclamation point, hope that's sourced from God, who is who he says he is and is going to do everything he has promised to do by the power of, not you, by the power of God the Spirit, who lives in you and through you. You see, hope is rising. Not because the world's getting better, not because the things going on around us is filled with more certainty. In fact, it's filled with more uncertainty. But hope is rising because God is a source of our hope. And his promises will always come true. So may the God of hope fill you with joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of God the Spirit. May the God of hope, your hope, fill you with joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of God the Spirit. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, as you believe in him, as you place your faith in him. Why? Because the God of hope, when you're tethered to him, he will fill you with his joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of God the Spirit. This week, starting today, say those words. Let those words fill you and overflow within you with a confident expectation. May the God of hope, fill you with joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope, according to the power of God the Spirit. Let's pray. Lord, I pray that those will be the words that guide us through this entire Christmas Advent season. Lord, I pray that these words will fuel hope with every single person. That God, you are our source of hope. And God, because you are a source of hope, you fill us with joy and peace. Not because this world is filled with joy and peace, but because you are joy and you are peace. So Lord, may we trust in you. May we place our faith in you, no matter how small that faith is. It's connected to you. so that we may overflow with hope by the power of your Spirit. In your name I pray.